Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the More Sibyl podcast. Today, I have the honor of hosting a remarkable individual whose work and life journey, I think, really beautifully intertwined with the things of you talk about transnationalism, community health, cultural identity, of course. So he's a clinical associate professor in community health at the University of Illinois Chicago School of Public Health. And not only is he a dedicated educator and researcher focused on health behaviors and disparities among culturally diverse populations, but he's also an advocate for refugee and immigrant health. He was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and raised in Chicago. He's a 1.5 generation transnational Nigerian-American whose personal and professional experiences offer a lot of insights. He's also the voice behind the podcast, My Black is Transnational, where he explores the intricate ties and identities within the Black immigrant community. Everyone, please join me today in welcoming Dr. Kelechi Ibe-Lamberts to the podcast. On a Saturday morning.
Wow.
And a father of many kids. So thank you. On a Saturday morning. We know as parents that time is golden hour. So let's do this quickly before one of our munchkins interrupts us. Because we know it's a matter of time. It's not if, it's when.
Listen, it's not a matter of if, it's when. At this point,
it's when.
You keep
Yeah.
seeing me face this way. That means they're coming for me. But no, thank you so much. It is a pleasure. It's an honor to be on this show, to be on the Most Sibyl podcast. It's long overdue, my sister.
I know.
Thank you
so
much for having me on the show. Okay. I'm excited to gist with you about all the things that I do and all the things that you do, and just thank you for the introduction. I was like, where did she get all this information? I forgot that. But
I had your folder. I had your binder ready ever since you reached out to all of us. But let's just start. Let's start. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things intriguing about you. Yeah. First, your last day, and I know a little bit about your story because through Mrs. Seriki we've talked. So let's just unpack how you grew up, and then I'm curious to know about that 1.5 transnational Nigerian-American,
For sure.
So let's start with your upbringing, which I think is very unique.
I have a very, very unique upbringing in terms of just my migration experience and everything. I was born in Nigeria, and I was there until I was about 8 years old. So I came to the U.S. in 1997.
Wait, before you talk about immigration story, even your parents, one being Christian, one being Muslim, one being from one part of the country. Yeah, we gotta start with that.
Yeah.
Dr. Lamberts, yeah.
So it's a hodgepodge thing, right? And I also am someone that has, when we talk about adoptive parents as well, right? And those things too, there are also dynamics of that. But my mom is Muslim. Like the woman who raised me, she's Muslim. Not my biological mom, but she adopted me. And my dad is Igbo. My biological mother is Akwa Ibom and Yoruba, which is, yeah. And then my mom that raised me, of course, and we also have ties to Ghana as well. So yeah, so that's in terms of
the United African, they need a child to unite Africa. You be the poster child for it. Cultural, religious harmonization, tribal harmonization. Get Kelechi. He's the child for it.
I'm the poster child of the African.
We can coexist. Those bumper stickers we see coexist. They just put your face beside it.
African porridge is what they're calling me. But no, it's so I came in with so many mixed information in my upbringing, and the irony of it all is that I don't even speak the language, which is, I understand it, right? I understand Yoruba very well because I grew up in a Yoruba household. Igbo is something I'm still learning. But so my dad is, full Igbo. We're from Ore. So if I was to be patriarchal, I would claim, Imo State, Ore. We're from, I'm Imo in the countryside of Ore. So, my upbringing was mostly in Lagos, actually. And then, sometimes you go to Imo State or sometimes in Abuja, but mostly Lagos, and as far as I can remember, in Apapa. And so when my parents are not together. So, of course they separated. And when they separated, they, I was with my mom. So I was with my mom and Apapa, and my dad was in the Navy. Both were in the Navy. And then my dad stayed until the Navy. climbed the ranks all the way until he retired, where he was the chief medical officer of the Nigerian Navy.
Oh,
and
nice.
so he, but by the time I immigrated to the U.S. in '98, that's when things really started to open up. Because at that point, I had a younger, Lord, I say younger, God forgive me. I had an older sister that passed from sickle cell.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear.
Yeah, this was 1995. Ironically, that was the year my younger brother was born. So, my youngest brother was born in December '95. I believe my sister passed maybe like 6 months before that. So it's been some, in terms of being the youngest one and then now turning to be the oldest, the responsibility the shift in that also was very interesting as well. Having a younger brother, and then by the time my younger brother was there, about 2 years later, that was when I ended up moving to the U.S. But it was just me. My younger brother stayed behind, and then I came.
That was at 8 years old when you moved to the U.S. Wow.
Yeah, unaccompanied. You know how Nigerians unaccompanied, man. So yeah, and so the woman who raised me, who I call my mom, my mom. She came here maybe like the year before or so, and so I wanted to come to the U.S. It was an opportunity. They sent me here, of course, for education and whatever other reason. I was too young to understand, but I ended up coming to New York and staying with an uncle. And I was like, nah, I don't like New York. And I didn't like New York. And so fortunately, I wanted to be in Chicago with who was essentially my godmother. I wanted to be there. And so she was in Chicago, came to Chicago at 8, and life just started for me. At that point, that's when life really started for me, because at that point I was growing up in the north side of Chicago. That's where I was really, a lot of my acculturation process started there, where I started to understand the American lifestyle and the American expectation. Because I spoke English very well due to being in Nigeria, going to English schools, British-based schools. So it wasn't hard for me to be able to adjust. My accent was, code switching, and everything was
kids are so adaptable, yeah.
So very, very, and because I already had all these things, so I was exposed to so many things, English, and then speaking Yoruba, movies, and all these things, and then going to Ghana and all. So there was so many different types of experiences that I was already exposed to. So being able to see my parents, like my mom here that raised me, she speaks Hausa, she speaks Ghana, she speaks Yoruba, she speaks Arabic. So it's like she's very her linguistic abilities are through the roof, and just to navigate the African streets. I guess that's just how she did when she was in Ghana hustling and when she was working for her mom as a merchant. So coming here, just kind of watching how she operated, my ability to also adapt was something that I was able to learn very quickly. And so when I was growing up in Chicago on the north side, trying to blend, they call me Kelly. And so I was initially, when I came in, I was going with the name Kelly. I didn't really use Kelechi at all. I actually do an episode about this on my podcast, but I didn't go with the name Kelechi at all. It wasn't for a while until the only people that knew me was like Kelechi. But ultimately, I was going with the name Kelly. And that was how people would address me, Kelechi Ibe-Lamberts. I didn't even throw the Ibe in there. At first, the Ibe part wasn't even there. And of course, as I got older, that's when I learned about the real meaning behind my last name. Because at that point, I was just thinking, Lambert sounds more English than anything. So let's just use that. And let's just, go from there. And so Kelechi Ibe-Lamberts was what I was identifying with, at least through, I would say 5th grade through 8th. When I came here, I started off at 5th grade and then went all the way through 8th grade. And so, I was coming up in a Yoruba household, even though I was Igbo, and a Muslim household, even though I was born Christian. And so I was having to now also figure out, which way I should go about with my life. Because I was given, no one forced anything on me, which was also a blessing, right? Like my mom here was like, as long as you have God, like that's all I care about. Whether you want to do Christian, whether you want to do Muslim, doesn't matter. So long as you have God and you believe and you're showing that you're consistent, you're religious, then I'm good with that. And so I was always, living a Christian life for the most part, but I was very curious about Islam. So I came up and I wanted to learn a little bit about that. My mother and family members were very gracious as far as opening me, exposing me to that, and really having rich conversations about the difference between Christianity and Islam and some of the things like that. So for me, I was like, wow, this is interesting. So I had that exposure in my life, and I practiced it for like a short period of time. I was, going to, Arabic school and learning about Arabic and learning some of those things. because I just wanted to know what that lifestyle was like. And because everybody around me, because I was growing up in that community, was all primarily Muslim. And I was the only one that on Sundays I'd go to church, and I would do that essentially by myself. Or if there was an auntie that I knew went to church, I'd go to her church. So very independent at a very young age. My mother was a nurse. She worked multiple shifts. Her husband was a taxi driver at that time, and then he did the CTA, which is the bus driving service. So for me, I had to be very independent in the U.S. I learned at a very young age, like, if you don't do this, if you don't know how to do this for yourself, I don't know, you're pretty much on your own. So, so I just had to learn how to be able, when it came to grocery shopping and things like that. And it's just, as I even reflect on this, I'm talking to you now, I was like, this... Most parents now would be even me as a parent, I'd be very hesitant, right? Like, but when I was young, like my mom, there's all these, maybe about like 3 blocks away. This one, I didn't have a cell phone or anything. Mom, she would just give me money.
Corner shop.
Like, it's almost like treating like, and just be like, go to Aldi's. I would go and get my own groceries, like she'd give me the money. I'd go and get my own groceries. Yeah, one of those old school shopping carts that people use for laundry sometimes. I drag that thing to Aldi's, and I go and shop and get all the things I want, and I walk back, and I walk back home maybe 3 or 4 blocks, just walking. No cell phone, no anything. And I just like, and I wasn't alone. Like, I would have other cousins and friends that we would do something similar, where it was just like our parents trusted us a lot back then.
It was before the internet, and they got to hear a lot of things. So
exactly. I was very, very independent growing up in America. I learned a lot on my own. I learned how to navigate the system on my own, for better or worse. But it's pretty much what made me who I am today. And it really informed a lot of the things that I do now in my profession as a researcher. And I know we'll talk about the transnationalism piece in a little bit, but it really, a lot of my experiences are fueled, are what fueled this agenda that I developed, because everything that I realized from back there really represents, what I thought I was alone, but then when I started having conversations with other people, I realized that, wow, this thing is not as unique in a sense, but it is. There's this, essentialism that's there, where it's unique to us. I mean, it's unique to others, but to us it's normal. So it's like, so I started to think about those things. Very much.
Just a few clarifying questions. So your mom, who raised you, who you came to meet here, what was the relationship she had with your family?
Oh, she was like my mother's cousin. So it's my auntie, Wow. Nigeria, we don't do like...
Yeah. We don't do all that stuff, yeah, that's your mommy, big mom. I'm mommy America. I'm sure you should have a name. And exactly. Did she have kids of her own as well?
No.
Okay. And what's your relationship with her now, and also your biological mom and dad?
Yeah, they're still... I mean, they're good. They're friends. I mean, they talk occasionally. They, when my mother comes to visit, like my mother came to visit us in the U.S. last year. This is the first time in a while to see her grandkids. And so she came, she visited, my mom's here, and they're fine. They're good.
Okay. Wow. I mean, I love hearing good stories of people who come to the U.S. and they had a somewhat pleasant experience, because we know that, some have just gone through a lot of woeful things, in the hands of so-called family friends. So I'm glad that it turned out well for you. So let's unpack this whole 1.5 generation transnational. Okay. What does that mean in simple terms, please?
1.5 is basically, as I said, a 1.5 transnational immigrant is someone who... So 1.5 generation ultimately are immigrant kids that come to a new country, and they were born in their home country, but they're not fully developed. So they're between the ages of, let's say, 6 to 12, right? They haven't really developed as adolescents into young adults, still not knowing anything. So they're right in that delicate time of migration, where the first generation immigrants are those who already developed our full mind, body, and understanding of what they're doing. So they come to the U.S., they understand what they're about to get themselves into, or maybe they don't, but they shall know they made the choice to move. And the kids of those immigrants sometimes don't, especially the ones who are, within that age range that I described. And the second generation are the ones who are born here in the new country. So those kids, the ones that are in between, that is the 1.5. That is us.
Okay.
We're still, we're still there. And another example I always use when I talk about this, like the Dreamers. I know some people who may be listening are familiar with the Dreamers and what that situation is in relation to like policy and the Dream Act. But those kids that kind of fall within that range are essentially mostly 1.5 generation, because a lot of them come at a young age with the dream of being able to achieve, education and access. So that is now the transnationalism part is just because of that connection to home. Yes, we're young, we haven't fully developed yet. We still remember home. Sometimes if we get all our papers together and everything, we're able to go back home. We're able to go back home for, holidays and then come back. And that's part of our upbringing as well, is that we're coming here to the US, we're doing our schooling, we're living our lives here, but also when it's time for holidays and our parents are going back, we go back with them. We'll spend time, we'll kind of catch up with friends and that we grew up with, that we're going to their compound and playing football or anything. You're able to still have that connection back home and still be able to go home, go back to Nigeria, maybe visit during the holidays and then spend time with friends. And then I'll come back to US before school. And I'm able to still keep memories of Nigeria fresky in multiple worlds. So that 1.5 is essentially my experience, where I described it earlier that I was here at a young age, but there are times that maybe I was able to brush while also still trying to understand what America is or what America means to me.
To you. Okay. And here I was thinking, when you said 1.5, I was thinking you're just going to say, third culture kid, but because I'm not, third culture, I divided it by 2, so you made 1.5, but yours just sounds way cooler. So I'm sorry to hear about your sister. I imagine that was that must have been quite a loss for you, and just the impact. I mean, going from the second born to like the first child, and all of a sudden. And so, how many siblings do you have in total?
Right now I have in total, it's me, my younger brother, and then I have a younger sister on my dad's side.
Okay. Your parents separated and remarried. Oh, okay. Did they remarry?
Yeah.
Okay. So, you talked about just the resilience you had to. I mean, 8 is super young. I went to boarding house at 9, but it's nowhere near trying to move to another country on my own for the first time and navigating that. But you had a lot of protective factors, the momsy who took you in and helped you and all of that. But what would you say were the hardest times you had? Just, and I'm asking this question for 2 reasons. One, for people who are considering sending their children on the same path like yours, and then also for children who are currently in that same situation. What are some of the hardest times you had, and what are some words of encouragement you'd like to throw in the hat?
It's a great question. I can't really honestly tell you that I had the hardest times may not be comparable to anyone else's, and I say that respectfully, because my mom here really tried, and I don't know whether it's a unique situation, but I was very, very aware of what she was doing for me, right? Like, again, I was very blessed to have someone who took me as her own truly, right? To the point where, again, I've said this before, where anybody asks me if it was my mom, that's my mom. Like, it's not even, my biological mom knows what's up too, right? Like, this is my mother. So I was very cognizant of what she was doing. So in times when I may have been like, I'm feeling abandoned or something like that, I never really thought that, because I understood everybody had their own hustle and everybody was trying to make it. And for me, it was my responsibility to do well and try my best to succeed. I would say that the times that were really difficult were probably when we started in high school, where I just didn't have that same level of freedom for many reasons. So I didn't have that a true opportunity to grow. A lot of my growth had to be, I would say, manufactured, right? And it really influenced through media. I honestly think it saved me from a lot of things. I was very fortunate that I didn't really have all my documentations yet at a young age. So honestly, I didn't have the liberty of being able to do some things that other kids my age may have been able to, because on my mind I was like, listen, if you F up, whatever, you're going back. And I wasn't ready to go back, right? I did not want to go back. So
I can't believe we can talk about that as a blessing, like, thank God I didn't have all of my papers complete, because that made me, walk a straight line.
Seriously, no, but it's true.
Yes,
it's true.
Yes. No, for real.
It's true. I had to walk a very straight line, and I had to make sure. I mean, I don't know if I would have wowed out too much, but just the idea of maybe I was in high school and I would have been working.
Plus, you're in Chicago, you could have done just something. It wasn't hard. Being bad wasn't gonna be hard.
It wasn't hard, right?
And teenage stupidity too, with boys and.
As in, so and then if there's money, you call like boys are making more money. Oh God, now I'm just like, listen, who are you talking to? Do you tell me? Show my dream. How much money I have in my. So for me, there are opportunities that I just couldn't take advantage of, right? And so for me, I would say those things were discouraging. So I always felt like I had a deprived, teenage year teenage years because I couldn't really do anything. I just had to focus on my book. Shall I hope to make it to college? Shall I become a doctor or something? And then we'll see what happens from there. So making friends, going to, different activities, to movies and doing those types of things, those opportunities didn't present themselves as much as they probably could have. Of course, my parents were very strict. So that also in itself on top of everything. So I had a very, very really, I wouldn't say sheltered, but it was very bounded. Like it was just the life was my options were limited, and I couldn't really. My rebellious phase wasn't really rebellious because if I told you that I rebelled, it was like, what are you doing? The most I did was I don't know, not wash the dish or something. I don't know, but it was so very. So as far as like, and even for those who are listening, I really think that again, my story is unique, and I can elaborate on it more and more. But ultimately, I was very, very driven to gain my independence. I was already independent enough, but I really couldn't wait until I was on my own, right? And it was even something that like I posted earlier today that talked about just the involvement in the education system. My mom, she was never truly involved, and even her husband, no one really understood what I was going through. So I had to solve my own problems, or just not even get into any problems, right? So I couldn't because I knew that I didn't have that. It's not because she couldn't. It's not because she wouldn't. She couldn't. Like my mom wasn't too aware of what was going on in the system. She was busy working,
hustling,
2 good jobs. Yeah, so I didn't have time to get her out of that. I really didn't want to get her out of that groove. My best thing was just if she doesn't know anything, just figure it out on your own. Right, and don't even get yourself in trouble. Don't give them a reason to call them. Just
put her out of work because you're gonna be in trouble more.
God, I don't want it, man. I don't want it. And I knew she was working hard to be able to make sure. Like I think she explained. That's one thing that I do for my kids is that I'm not one to tell my kids everything, but I'm definitely very transparent because she was always transparent with me as far as like, listen, or just if you don't mind, so listen, all this job that I'm doing now is for you because I need to make sure that we're able to pay the lawyer, pay this, pay. If you want to stay in America, IB, so this is what we have to do, blah, blah, blah. And so she always very good at just breaking down the reality of what's happening in life right now. And so at least for what my age could handle. And so I always understood from the jump that, listen, don't even try and get yourself into trouble where you're going to have somebody come and call this woman off her work now, because if I do anything, any money that she's missing out is going to my own betterment, and I need to get out. Like I need to go and be independent. I want to go to college and do my own thing, because once I got to college, it was like at this point, it was my whole life took off.
Wow. It's funny how when you were, and by the way, shout out to your mom, by the way, shout out to your parents, your mom, your biological mom and dad, and a special shout out to your mom, because all the things she did, she shouldn't, there was no, what was the reason behind it? It just shows the kind of heart she has, and she didn't have to exactly. She went above and beyond, and your current relationship with her just shows that it was something really, really real, and I'm so thankful to hear that. But,
it's like, I'm sorry not to I just have to add this, because if she hears this, I want her to hear this. And I say this because I really mean it. It was like I was born for her. I was born. She couldn't have her own kids, but I was born for her, and that's how it feels. Our relationship, I don't know what I would do, right? Like, and because she was always, I can't explain to you. A major part of just my, like I said, even though we were sheltered in the crib, I didn't go out as much. Maybe I'll go out and play sports with my friends and stuff. But a lot of my upbringing was with her, shout out to watching game shows, watching soap operas, like just doing all the things that we were doing. There is no other person that I can even imagine, who would have done what she did for me. I can't even. no one, not to the extent in which she did it. I was her own. I was for her, and it was really, and that's how I look at it to this day. So that is, she means the world to me. And I know, like, even my own, like I said, my own personal dealings, I understand my biological mother. I also always show her appreciation too, because it's not easy
to live your child.
Let your child go to the other part of the world. And I talk to my dad about this all the time. You know, the situation that went down, into how he, you know, to even allow that to happen. Right? Again, you imagine as an adult now, I start to see these things. Right? Like you are, you're married, you divorce, or you separate. Right, and then your child is going to another state, and it's not. Maybe you talked about it a little bit, but by the time you realize, you're like, "Hey, wait a minute, Like, you know, so like even with Father's Day coming up, like my dad, I always give him big ups too, because he could have started a wildfire of like litigious stuff that could have went down and be like, "Listen, my son, why is my son in the U.S.?"
Very as an Igbo man, like sons are very precious. Yeah,
so he could have, but he understood that, you know, there's an opportunity there, and all he did. My dad raised me on the phone. That was another thing too. He would call me every Saturday. When back in Nigeria, when they would only have the telephone. Center. Nightel. So he would go every Saturday. He would call me. He would at least call me. We talked for about an hour or something. Just always trying to give me the best advice, and of course, you know, he always says, yes, I did that, but I also give you credit because you listened, because you didn't have to listen, right? And I didn't, but I would always take his word as gold. Even when I didn't like him, even when he didn't, you know, maybe I felt like he was too rigid, too intimidating, too gruff, but he always never failed a Saturday to call me, at least throughout, you know, grade school until high school. And then when my high school graduation, he came to my graduation, right? And so those things really, really set the premise for the type of person that I aspire to be, and the type of parent that I want to be, the type of father that I aim to be, because, and the type of mentor, and just because I grew up in a space where people who didn't, it's not by blood, you get me, it's not by blood, but the relationships that people, you know, developed with me, they treat me like their own. It really is something that I pay for now with younger ones, with other people, where it doesn't have to be blood. Blood is not my choice, but how I go about treating, how I go about loving you, how I go about relating and taking care of you, and committing to you as a person and wanting you to do well. That is something that I learned from my parents, and that's the part of the culture that I think sometimes, you know, people forget, and that's why I value, and that's why this transnational thing that I do sometimes is very important to me. It's not just about understanding the connection back home, but it's also the power of the village that sometimes is missing, you know, in the U.S. that you can get back home, where we don't care. It's not always about your blood. Yes, those things matter when you go deep down to the roots. But as far as us looking out for each other, you know, as far as us being able to care and treat each other as our own, and being able to know that your step forward is my step forward, no matter what, those things are crucial, you know. And I think having those values still retained within our hearts somewhere, somehow, whether it's passed on from generation to generation, I think will lead to a much better outcome in terms of you know, how other kids of the future are growing up, and how they will go about contributing back to society and help feeding us as we get older.
Exactly.
Because it's going to be them that's going to take care of us too. So it's like we have to also make sure we do that and instill those things.
Wow! I mean, what a beautiful story, Kelechi. And I mean, there's so many conversations like this out of it. And it was funny how you were talking about, I wish I had, you know, for my teenage years, I wish I had done one. And you could see the good things that came out of it, and also the longings you had to just be more of a teenager. But I was just thinking, like, in Nigerian parents be like, that's our prayer, you know, that you focus on your book, you know. It's funny how Nigerian parents will say, okay, he did well, but you're like, you know, I wish I was just, you know, a bit more out there. So
yeah. Oh my God. Listen, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm every Nigerian parent's dream. I swear to God. Like, I am every Nigerian's parent.
If Kelechi can do it, you can't too. We sent him to 8 years old on the plane, and he is a doctor now in America.
Mo, I'm telling you, we're laughing about this thing, but I swear to you, it's the truth. Like and I love, because when I'm on the WhatsApp, like my pops will send me like, oh, this is from your uncle, it's from your auntie, all these messages about like, oh, our son, he traveled and he did this. We're so proud of him. And even when I talk to other auntie Kemi, them, they always, and it's true. I'm not. It's not a facade. This is who I am, but. I also think about those things too, because of course when you have the younger ones, because of the way our people talk, oh, you see how Kelechi did, see how Kelly did, now you look at you, what can you do? And so I always have to have those conversations with the younger generation, like, look, yes, I did it, I lived this life, and I have no regrets, but Shad, don't let this, if things were the other way around and I had the same freedoms, like I crawled so you can fly. So like you have to fly, go ahead and fly. Don't worry about trying to crawl like me. I did what I needed to do, but you too, if you have a chance, shall be smart, shall be safe. But when I talk to my younger, like my brother, oh my God, I used to feel so bad about the pressure. Right. And I think my brother ended up my brother in his own way rebelled, right? Because for him, he was like, not him, right? And I don't want to be compared to him. I want to be my own. Like my brother is, Yoruba, name, everything. Like, so he's like, listen, his name's Kelechi, my name is Toki. Like, we're living two different lives. Even though he's the, he said it, they put him on a pedestal. I don't want that, right? And so me and my brother had to have that conversation especially when he was in college and I was in grad school. I tell him, like, look, don't do that. Like the me that you find out, when you find out who I am and what I desired and things that you don't have to go ahead and try to mimic that. Please find your own path. My own thing that I care about as a big brother is just make sure that you're safe, that you're making smart decisions for your own success and your trajectory. But other than that, try to live your life, man. At the end of the day, I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to do those things, because that's the type of pressure that people will put when you have my story, which was created by luck, fortune, and just from boundaries.
It makes
it seem like, oh my God, you're the perfect child. I don't want that. That's not, no. If I listen, trust me, if that green card came at a young
USCIS, thank you.
In a situation.
I can't believe a time will come with taking immigration issues as a testimonial point. But here we are on a Saturday morning in June. Okay. God, well, I mean, thanks for balancing that out. Before I ask the next question quickly, the Ibe-Lamberts, so I can understand Ibe from your dad's last name. Where's the Lamberts from?
Mm-hmm. So yeah. So this is tying into my popsy's side, and my popsy them are very, very high. Now I would say hierarchical, but they're very old school in terms of dynasty. Right? There's this, so we're part of this dynasty, and my popsies, this is dead ass thing. Like it's not a joke. Like when I took my wife to Nigeria, like she was like, "Wow, okay, this is like some House of Dragons type shit." Like, like what is going on? But so when it's broken down to me, right? So my full original like village name is Ibe-Lamberts, right? That's the name of the family that came from a bigger family of the Nwachukwus. So in our village, right, like it originally started with the Nwachukwus, and then it branched off to like the Ibe-Lamberts, and then that is the name. And then my grandfather's name was Lamberts Festus Ibe. They cut out the Akalam part. And so he had him and my great uncle, who his older brother is Godfrey Ibe. But instead, I think at the end, now when they started having their own children, my grandpa had 2 wives, and my grandmother had 17 children. My dad is the 5th. My dad is the 4th. Sorry, my dad is the 4th. And so he, essentially the name Ibe-Lamberts, and it's Ibe-Lambert. And when I came to you guys, I just threw that S on there just to be different. But Ibe-Lambert, and it's essentially children of Ibe. I mean, children of Lambert. That's essentially what it was supposed to be. So the Ibe-Lambert part is supposed to be, because then they have the Ibe Godfrey and then you have the Ibe-Lamberts. And those are like the 2 dynasty houses in our village, compound area that shared a compound, especially during like the Biafra War and everything. And so that was ultimately what happened. And because my dad was like, you could easily go with Ibe if you wanted to, but essentially, and my uncle, my dad's oldest brother doesn't use the Ibe-Lamberts. So my cousins from my uncle's side, most of them just use Ibe. That's it.
It's from your
the Ibe-Lambert. I think my dad, my dad and my grandpa had a close relationship, because I think it was either during the war, or around that time, my grandpa had went to Lagos and took my dad, with him. So my dad was one of the first of his children to grow up in Lagos when my dad was, my grandpa had his business and everything. And my uncle and his older siblings, my dad his older siblings were growing up in the village in Imo State. And so I think my dad and my grandpa had their own interesting relationship because of their experiences in Lagos. So of course, as part of that, the Ibe, my dad, I think in dedication to that, kept the Lamberts part connected to the Ibe. And so that's how it came to be.
Okay. Nice. So I know what you currently do now. And we can use that to really talk about just your focus on community health, immigrant health, and advocacy. But can you just walk us through quickly how you went from high school to grad school?
I went to high school, from high school, I came to college thinking that I was going to be an MD. Because every African,
and your dad is a doctor too.
My dad's a radiologist, retired, but he's still practicing. He has his own thing, but in Abuja. But so in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm of course I have to be a doctor, right? Because that's what everybody expects of me. And so when I was going through school, I just realized that I didn't like that. I didn't like biology, I didn't like chemistry, but still, nevertheless, I was like, I like helping people, I like interacting with people, I like leading, running programs. I was part of different organizations, part of fraternities, so I did all those things in college. That's why I said when I went to college, I was all the things that I was like, man, I couldn't, when I couldn't, I started exploring more in college and really trying to immerse myself in various cultural groups. So I was part of many things, but when I was in finishing my junior year, I realized, okay, I want to do community work. Like, I like this idea, but it's also, I still didn't give up on the medicine thing. I was going to just do both. So I got into the master's program in public health. And that's when, I really started to understand the transnational component. And that's when I was doing my dissertation. I was doing my thesis. And I wanted to understand about water scarcity in Africa. But I also, and I was having a conversation with my advisor, Dr. Reginald Austin, I'll never forget. We were having just a conversation similar to you and I talking about just, okay, what's your upbringing? What is this? Okay, you're just trying to learn more about me. Like, why do you have this? You have ties to Ghana, like all this. And he's just like, you have a very unique African situation. Like, with this connection to Africa, like, how does that factor into a lot of things? And I started really looking, I was like, that's interesting. And so I started looking into it, and that's when I learned the term about transnationalism. And I was like, but this thing doesn't really apply to African. They don't talk about it with the African community. So my thesis was on water scarcity among transnational Nigerians. And ultimately, I just wanted to know, when Nigerians who are now in the U.S., are they willing to give money back to, NGOs in Africa to help improve the water situation? Right? And of course, we know what the answer was.
No, of course.
You already know what the answer was. So, like,
we already send money back. What money for water? For what? In the arms of the angel. Me call them a go. I'm sorry. Don't double task me.
Listen, so that whole thing was like, at the end of the day, it was like I said,
you didn't need to do this. I've told you the answer. You can have just gotten 5 Nigerians together and you've gotten your answer. This is over. Graduate in 5 days.
The consensus was easy. It was so easy to reach the point of saturation. It was ridiculous. But ultimately, of course, electricity matters more, right? Everybody wanted to do it NEPA back then. But anyway, so that one ultimately led to that. And I was like, man. So I really like this thing. But how far would this medical school thing? What do I tell my parents now? So I was like, at this point, I don't know. I really like community health. I like public health. I like doing this. And I remember one of my friends was actually telling me, like, this whole medical thing you're talking, listen, it doesn't make sense for you because you really like to be in the community. You really like to go out and help and advocate and do all these things. So why don't you just, I was like, no, man, I told myself I want to do this thing. I want to do it. Not until I met my wife. That's when this whole thing changed. Like, because she's a medical doctor and she's a pediatrician. And I remember meeting her, and the way we met was because we were in hopes of being able to, I was in hopes of using, our connection to be able to facilitate my way into medical school still. And she was finishing her 3rd year, getting into a 4th year. She just finished step 2. And so I had told her, I think we were talking, I told her in the car what my plan was. I was like, okay, I want to do my PhD and then I want to do my MD. And then I'm doing my PhD now, but I want to get into med school. And then I'm going to do like residency. And then when I'm done, I'll just go back and do my research. And so she was like, so you're going to go through medical school. You're going to get yourself in all that debt. You're only going to practice. You're only going to go to residency, and then you're not going to practice for only like 2 years, and then you go back in. She's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. She's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, what are you doing? I was like, actually, the way she put it, I was like, no one has ever told me that in the way that she said it. And I was like, you know what? I appreciate this honesty, because everybody's like, yeah, you can do it. Don't mind. Don't worry, you can do it. And I was just like, okay. Yeah, I can do it. And then when she told me, and she put it like, listen, you're going to be in that much debt. What life do you want for yourself? Like, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I thought about it, I was like, that's it. Yeah. I'm just going to focus on being a PhD.
What did your dad say, though? I'm curious to know what did your dad say.
Like, let me make things easy on my life. Why am I trying to do all this? Who am I going to make happy? And at some point, that's when I had the conversation with my parents. Like, listen, I'm not going to medical school. I'm getting my PhD. I hope that's good enough for you all, because I've really, really tried. And I want to be happy. And my mother was like, listen, as long as you're happy, now that you're telling me this after all these years. So my dad at this point, it was when I graduated and he came to get one for my doctoral graduation. It was funny because he came and he was like, okay, so now that you've done that, don't you still think you want to go and now do your medicine, so you can now have the best of both worlds, and you can be a global icon? I said, yeah, I said, you can do that if you want to. I'm tired. I like my research. I like what I'm doing with I like this transnational thing. Nobody else is doing what I'm doing. I think I can find a lane and I'll be fine. I think I'll be able to, whatever global icon you want me to be, that God wants, then it'll happen through there, because I'm not going to medical school. It doesn't make any sense. I don't have the same passion that I have for this work that I'm doing right now. So going from college to grad school was really, it was a cultural experience. It was a cultural experience for me, because I was able to, put myself in different pots and different experiences. I was able, being in the African community, but also the African-American community, and just going back and forth in that bicultural space was very interesting. But it's very similar to what I said before earlier, right? I was already, so exposed to so many different things growing up because of how mixed my family was in cultural in the cultural pool, that it really just reflected itself on my behavior when I was in college and going through grad school as well. Wow.
Thank you. What a story, and what a testament to just your resilience. And of course, many thanks to your wife, for drawing some sense into you.
She saved my life. She saved my life, sis. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was telling myself when I told her, like, I was like, seeing what she, goes through in a medical field, and just the ups and downs that go with it. It is something that I was like, I tell her all the time, like, listen, you saved me, because I would have been doing it and I would have not been happy. I realized very, very quickly that I do not like clinical related work compared to the public health related work. And even though I want to bridge the gap, I would only be doing it for the status. I would just be doing it to just show that I'm MD,
I've arrived.
Just to make my mom feel. Yeah, that doesn't do anything. And I realized that, also, especially because my wife, when we met, our oldest daughter was about 2. And at that point, again, very similar, if you think about it, right? For me and her, when we were becoming more serious, and Alicia, became involved, I already came from a background where somebody who raised me is not my biological. So that thing, that making it your own. And so for me, I started even thinking, okay, if me and Wanda are going to be serious, and we're really going down this path that might lead to, long-term relationship, and this young girl is involved, what type of father do I want to be? What type of, I'm going to be doing all these things. I've always told myself I want to be a better father than a better doctor. That's my philosophy. So I told myself at this point, like, doing an MD PhD, one of the big things is going to take my time. It's going to prevent, being a PhD is already, what I'm saying? So I was like, doing MD now just because it's going to take away access to me. And I don't want that. I would rather for this child and for other kids, I would want them to be able to see me be present, and I'd rather be around for them at this stage in their life than to be around when they've already been grown and they're like, "God, where were you?" So, that really put the nail in the coffin as far as any dreams to be an MD, because I was like, no, I don't want to. Just because I have 2 titles, ultimately what it means is just my time is going to be in demand, and I don't want to be able to now take away my time from my kids, future kids, or anything like that. So all those things really factored into my decision. That's why I tell her she saved my life, because she made me really think and reflect about what I really want to be and who I really want to be, and what type of man, father, person that I see myself in the future. And I had to really make a decision, because, you know, it's not just her life, but it's also, you know, our daughter's life now. But I had to make sure that all those things really factored in.
Okay. And congrats. I know you celebrated your 6-year wedding anniversary recently. Congrats on that.
Yes.
Oh my God. There's so many questions I have for you. So, your wife is African-American and you have all these multiple layers in Hammond, and then you have kids, you know, together, and then there was one that came into the marriage. So there's so many complexity. How would you say you've been able to make it work, you know, both in harmonizing those layers that you come with, and also what she comes with, and the things you've co-created together?
It was very, very, I think when we first started the dating process, that was something though that I was very, very, you know, clear about, in terms of just understanding that, you know, if we're going to be serious, y'all know that, like, I come from a community and a culture that is very, very, you know, it might be very different from what you're exposed to. But if you stick with me, and I stick with you, and we really are, you're willing to be open-minded and really learn, I think you'll enjoy what it has to offer. And because for me, it was very easy for her and my adjustment, because, like I said, I already knew the African American culture. I was immersed in it.
Kelechi Ibe-Lamberts, you know.
So, you know, so like I was coming into space, and let me even tell you, I forgot to even tell you. So it turned from Kelly to Kels, and that's when, like, you know, of course, right, it evolved, right? Oh God, my name changes. Oh man, listen, it was Kelly. You know, when I was in middle school, in a white private schools, I was Kenny. And that was through high school, because I baptized myself anyway. But and then, you know, college, I went back. I was roommates with my cousin. My cousin knew me as Kelly, and then of course to make it cool, they went by Kels. And then at some point, when I went to grad school, I was like, listen, it's Kelechi. Kelechi's, you know, there's people who knew me from back then call me Kels, fine, but Kelechi is the name. So going back to that, right? Just thinking about you know, with the upbringing, I knew the African American side. So when I get into her, you know, her side of the family, it was easy for me to navigate, easy for me to communicate, and everybody was, you know, good. I understood what the plight of the African American, you know, is, and what their struggles were. So it was now just like, all right, okay, my own turn. Like, so now when you want to know, like, for me to introduce you to my parents, for me to introduce you to my family, the African side, there's certain things, and I'm not just I can't just bring you, you know, 2 months into the relationship. We need to know that this thing is serious. Okay, add to the fact that you have a daughter from, you know, previous marriage or whatever. And so all those things matter. And so we had to make sure that we were very, very, we had to show everyone, including ourselves, most importantly ourselves, that we are serious about each other. Before I even bring you to my side, it wasn't until like graduation, like when I proposed to her on my graduation day. She I proposed to her on stage. Mr. So it wasn't until that day, like around that day was when like my parents were like, serious. Okay, like this is the girl. Yes, this is serious. So they're like, all right. So that's when people started to explore. And for her though, at that point, before, you know, just understanding the culture, understanding the food we ate, understanding the language, understanding the music, understanding the movies, you know, she would watch it, and then we would have those conversations about African and African Americans and like our similarities and our differences, right? And, you know, she has ties to the, you know, to the deep South in Mississippi and Alabama.
Rich heritage right there.
Right, because her mom is from Mississippi. Yeah, her mom's from Yazoo City, Mississippi, and her dad is from Prattville, Alabama. And so, you know, when I got to talk to them, we would have these really interesting conversations about being Black and their upbringing. There were so many similarities that sometimes I would find from like her parents' upbringing. I was like, oh, that's very African-like, right? So, I think so. In those times when we were really, you know, getting ourselves ready for marriage, you know, we were engaged and living in Florida. It really allowed us time to really get ourselves into understanding how do we want to share our culture for our kids. Right, I wasn't going to be like, oh, my kids are 100% Nigerian, because that's not true. Right, you have a rich history in African American and African American roots that I want my kids to also know and be proud of. So it was really just about give and take. And so for me, it was I'm very grateful for her because she really, really never resisted. You know, she was even willing to go to Africa. She was willing to go to the village, right? Like, it's not, she didn't hesitate. You know, even kids in Nigeria now, to go to the village. Wow, what? Right? So to go to the village, you know, and be able to see that was something that I really, really appreciated, because she didn't have to. She didn't put up a fight about it. She actually was embracing of that. And so she showed a really, she showed a great interest in wanting to know my culture, who I am, and how it would apply to her, because she never met a Nigerian, and never interacted with a Nigerian until she met me. So it's not like she may have had some friends that she was in med school with, some associates, but she never truly met or knew who a Nigerian person, or what it entails. A West African, I should say, in terms of describing me. She never understood it until she met me. So it was just a lot of new exposures. The Islamic side of my family, she never interacted with a Muslim like that, a Black Muslim. So we had a lot of interesting, this is my first time doing this, my first time seeing this, my first time learning about this. And that stuff still factors in now, like with our kids, with our oldest, with Alicia, it was like, all right, so how do we go about, doing this? So, I asked her, is it okay if I give Alicia a Nigerian name over time, right? As we get older.
First daughter, yeah.
Adora, right? And so, she was okay with that. And so, and even now, Alicia still claims that name, right? She takes it as her own. And I wanted it to be all inclusive. I wanted everybody to just be able to understand that our culture is rich. Our culture is dynamic, but it's not by force that, it has to be like this. Culture evolves, right? We can make our own. We can find our ways to be able to make it our own and be respectful to the history of it, but we can still make it our own, and we can still find a way to apply it to us and our kids that are coming. And so that's what even led me back to Chicago, is because even though I was in New York, upstate New York, all this time before 2022, after leaving Florida, my postdoc, the pandemic really put into perspective that, we needed to be next to, our cultural experiences, right? We wanted to be next to our village, and we wanted to learn the food, the music, the dance, the parties, the whether it's birthday
and
parties,
New York didn't have that?
All those things, where the kids.
Sorry, because I'm like, what part of New York were you living in? Because I thought I was in Mecca of all things. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Oh, God, no.
Okay, yeah. You should have come down.
There's nothing.
Harlem, Brooklyn.
Oh, God. And so here's another thing. Oh, no. So my wife hates New York. She couldn't. And
I'm with her on that. It's good for visiting, but living there, I don't have to do it.
Like, listen, when she was pregnant,
I'm your wife for now.
When she was pregnant with my son, in 2020, that's pandemic too, but we were there for a fellowship at NYU, both of us. We were doing a fellowship. And, in the height of her pregnancy, man, I just remember her walking outside in New York. There's garbage everywhere. And she just started bawling, just crying. And I was like, babe, what's going on? She just couldn't stand the ilk, just everything about the garbage, the smell just started. She was like, I can't do this. And she's like, I just can't be here. So from then on, I knew New York was not an option. If I was to apply for any school, like NYU, to teach anywhere, I was like, New York City is out of the list. So, but anyway, so coming to Chicago really was just was driven by the fact that we wanted our kids, our youngest one, our oldest one, to really be surrounded in a space where the culture is being fostered. And on both sides. It wasn't just because, again, her parents, her family is here too, and then especially going to take trips to West Memphis to see, that her side of the family, or, when our dad is, thinking about going to family reunions in Alabama, taking the kids there to see that too. I wanted my kids to have the best of both worlds. I believe that they should have it, and it just allows them to be well-rounded. It allows them to be empowered, to be educated and diverse. And I think that just gives them the ability to be adaptable, to be able to fit in any room, to be able to fit in any space. When me and Wanda talk about what we want for our kids, that's what we want. We want our kids to go to any Black space, any space in general, but mostly any Black space, whether it's African, whether it's African-American, and be able to thrive, because they understand them both sides very well.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, your template, and I don't even know what to call it template, but the way you guys have built your lives, I think it really shows the importance of cultural reconciliation. If you're going into a married space with someone whose culture is different from yours, you have to be interested in how, they live their life and how they express themselves, and find a way to, imbibe the good parts. Because I know cultures will have good and bad sides. But the more you share the good things, the more you share, the better it becomes.
Yeah.
Now, as you go real quick, I should bring you back, because academia, we haven't even touched it.
We haven't touched that. And
we haven't touched that.
I have questions for you too, but we can.
Good. Maybe you should bring me on your podcast and we can talk about, because academia, how are you doing it? And this is going to be a very long conversation. We have to bring you back to really talk about academia, but we just have to mention a little bit about it so that we can do this whole episode justice. So, associate professor, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How you doing it? How you doing? Because I know. I'm asking you because I know. So how you doing it?
How am I doing
How you hacking it? How you hacking it? Yes.
Hacking it.
Because I know. I'm in the same space as you are. It's a really genuine question.
Well, I was fortunate enough, that coming in now, of course, here at UIC, I'm on a non-tenure track, and that's fine because I wanted to be, I wanted that, right? Because my chair offered me opportunities, like, hey, you want to go to tenure track? I'm like, nah, bro, I'm good. I don't, because I don't have to go through I'm good. Right? I know that academia is right now. I'm like, listen, I'll just take the rank and I will roll. And so, I've been fortunate enough to be in institutions that have just allowed me to be myself and really just bring in the work, and they see the value in it. And I think that's one of the things that I know that, okay, first, when most institutions, like I remember applying for a job at Boston University, and I remember having probably my best interview ever, but the politics, right? Like they wanted somebody that was already able to jump in and get an NIH grant and all those things. And I already tell people, like, listen, where I'm at right now with this transnationalism thing, it may not jump off and get an NIH or R01 off jump. We're probably going to go slow, and we're going to start with a pilot. We're going to work ourselves up, maybe a foundational grant, and work ourselves maybe to like an R21 or something. But I'm not really, coming in. And honestly, truthfully, I don't get too caught up in the academic life. I've definitely set boundaries like crazy. I really set boundaries like crazy in terms of, especially for my kids and my family. When it's time to work, I try to make sure I do it ahead of time. With teaching and everything, I really try to take time to prep. And again, like I said, I've been in schools that have allowed me to just do my thing, and colleagues who've been very collegial in terms of helping, providing support when it comes to teaching materials and trying to guide me there, especially when I was in upstate New York. I really learned a lot of good habits to bring into my new position now in Chicago. Of course, being in an R1 institution, very demanding. Oh, yeah. So, at some point, even though I don't operate, maybe I'm not necessarily on a tenure track, in my mind, I still operate like such. Because I'm always thinking about the market. Listen, at the end of the day, wherever I go, I always want to make sure I have grants, I have projects. So even though I'm doing maybe more teaching than my other colleagues, I still always have to make sure that I have like projects, collaborations, that I'm still publishing. I'm still doing all those things as well. And I know we'll save this for like another episode.
Yeah.
But honestly, I can't tell you the true answer. Like, I set boundaries for everything to just make sure, like, it's stressing me out. Like, I'm not going to kill myself for taking it. That's right. I'm just not going to. I've seen so many, my postdoc really put that in perspective for me, because I really started to see like the sacrifices that people make in order to live that life. And I was like, nah, I can't do that. Like, I don't want to do that, because again, I always think about my kids in the back of my mind. And I just remember during my postdoc, there was one instance where we had a lot going on. We had a grant, and I, went from the office, and I came from the office home, picked my daughter up from school, came, and I went right to my office in the house and typed. And I remember my wife and her, I can hear them talking, and my wife came to tell me again, and she was just like, she's always like, Daddy's always in his office. He's never with me, never playing. I was like, and that just was like, never again. I'll never put myself in that situation where I can't be able to at least take 30 minutes, an hour to be able to just sit, play with my daughter, enjoy, draw, art, play games, whatever. I need to make sure I make time. So for me now, it's really, I grind through the school semester. It's like I grind through it, I prep, make sure my classes are ready. When it's summertime, even if I have a project or research going on, I try to make sure that my kids are involved in some way. They're coming with me in these things, but I will never abandon them because of this job. So that's one of the things that drives me, I think, in terms of making sure that, and I understand that, there's some sacrifices, because I see my other colleagues who get certain awards and certain things, and they earn it, and $1 million grants, all those things, like you mow money bags, I see, but like, but I also understand that, for me, those are the things that, at some point they'll come, but it may not. A little bit more time that I may have been able to use to maybe write a couple more pages, and I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna come back to that page, maybe later on, when might come at the time that maybe others may have been getting them. But I know that I'm able to at least spend.
Wow, thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, we can definitely do a separate episode on just academia life and just your work and
so just
your
trajectory
and all that. Now, finally, as you go, you have a podcast, My Black is Transnational, where you explore the identities and experiences of Black immigrants. What motivated you to start this podcast, and what do you hope listeners can take away from it? And then finally, add where people can find you.
Yeah. So what led me to creating this podcast, honestly, was I wanted to take my research work. I'm a big sports radio, talk radio type of person. And all of this happened because I grew up, like I said, I'm very sheltered, and so I didn't really go out much. And so I spent a lot of my time on my Walkman listening to sports and listening to talk radio, or just listening to music. And so I was wondering one day, I was like, why can't we take academic work, and why don't we translate this work for the everyday person? Nobody has access to all these journals that were on Google Scholar or PubMed or Scopus, right? So how do we take this information and have conversations with people, regular people, who really understand the research work that we're doing? And I wanted to do that for my transnational work. I wanted people who are transnationals or not transnationals to be able to understand, and we can talk about these things. So I was initially thinking about that and trying to figure it out. It wasn't until it was actually the podcast. I always give them the props. Jesus and Jollof. I don't know if you remember that. Jesus and Jollof, right? With oh my God, with Yvonne and what's my girl's name? Lovey, yeah. So it was them, and they had an episode in their first season that really upset me. Not that they did anything wrong. It was because they did a thing called "Immigrant is a New Cool." I'll never forget that episode. And it was their third episode, and they were talking about all these things. When I was like, this is all my research work. Like, this is all the things that I've been doing. I'm like, why have I been holding back and not going on? And that's what motivated me to just do this. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go. I'm just going to figure out how to work on Anchor. I'm just going to get a weak microphone, and I'm just going to go and talk. Because at this point, people are talking to, and they're like, so I was driven by that, because I wanted to now go out there and show them, like, hey, this is what, my Black Transnational is. And so my first season was really trying to be more educational. But over time, I realized that, especially for what the listeners, I turned it from being a potential, academic talk or a potential, series of brown bag talks to where the transnational experience is within you. And I want you to come on the show and let's talk about it so that you can educate your peers about what it is to be transnational, what it is to have connections back home into your, whether it's to the diaspora or the continent, and how you use your cultural and your connections to home, and even adjusting to the U.S., how you leverage the best of both worlds. And so that's what this podcast ultimately has evolved to. It's almost like a legacy project in its own right, because I do also incorporate like my kids into it, right? I have a daddy-daughter talk I do with my oldest daughter, and as my youngest one starts to also get better, I want to start talking with them about their transnational experiences, what it's like being African American, but also African as well, and how being raised in this household by an immigrant is different, maybe compared to their peers. And then with their grandmas and everything. So I really started to bring that to the forefront, but I wanted to bring it through the lens of that transnational, the everyday transnational. And that's what, we're 5 seasons in, And it's kind of changed from just this, hey, I'm Dr. Ibe-Lamberts. Let me tell you about being the Black Transnational, and here's my research work. It's not turned into, having conversations with people like myself, even people, African Americans who don't want to go back to Africa, African Americans who do, right? Just these different conversations about what it is to be Black and have multiple identities, have multiple connections to multiple lands, and what we can be able to do to leverage that and bridge the gaps that have historically affected us interracially, because African Americans and African immigrants have their own little, and even Afro-Caribbeans, we have our own little mini tensions that exist in our community that other people don't understand except for those who are in it. And so how can we use these conversations to bridge gaps, to bring others back home if they choose to go back home, to allow others who are here but still remain separated from African Americans to be able to understand them a little bit more as well, so that we can, I feel like my goal is for unification. I feel like the Black community as a whole, if we can become united, we don't always have to agree, but we can become united and we can become a system of our own, and we can be able to fight institutional and structural racism by becoming our own institutions and structures as well. Yeah,
we're too divided and too distracted, fighting over, minutiae. If we can, harness our collective strength, we'll do so much more together.
So much more. You can find the podcast anywhere. It's My Black is Transnational. You can follow me, the host, at Black Transnational _ and the podcast is Black Transnational Podcast. That's on Facebook. That's on Instagram. And I always say Twitter, but Twitter is such a...
I know. Oh, my goodness. Or X.
X. I call it
like the drug. Not to be confused with the drug.
Oh, girl. Twix is
you call it Twix? My nice.
It's a state. It's so toxic, man. I don't know how to
I don't know how to do it. But you know what I found out? I had to create a separate one for academia, Really?
The academic Twitter is different from what I've been told. Yeah,
it's more wholesome. I'm like, wow. Because I have I've had one for since 2009, 2000. So I've had one for the longest time.
Mm-hmm, me too.
Even though I don't do much on it, I still see a lot of toxic stuff. But the academic one, I'm like, wow, where's this? This is my people. I'm seeing stuff that is edifying, Black people in medicine, getting tenure. And I'm like, so maybe you need to create a new account and just chisel out what you want to get, because an algorithm, it just throws a lot at you. Now, I'm done with all of my questions. I know you did mention you wanted to ask me questions. And if you're still able to hang on, I don't know if you had the question you wanted to ask me that I could tackle before I send you off. Otherwise, I'm done with my questions and I was about to do the outro. So,
no, we can do the outro, because I want to save this. I want to save part 2 for when you come on the show.
Okay.
You can come on my show.
Invite me. I'm more than happy to reciprocate.
I want to talk about the work you're doing with kidney,
prostate cancer. Yes.
Prostate cancer and all that. And especially so it's we're gonna just more about that, and then we'll get to really unpack your experience coming to the US and what that's like in your family, because I would love to be able to learn about your transnational experiences as well. So we'll save that for part 2.
Of course. And I want to also say Happy Father's Day, and also to your dad as well. And thank you so much for today. I've learned a lot about you and just getting to know how your story started. I know Mrs. Sarki has, when she introduced us, she said a lot of great things about you. So it was really nice to see the behind the scenes and, what has really helped shape the man that you've become. And thanks for, all of the conversations around, your life, your identity, and your work on racial harmonization, your wife, the beauty of your marriage, and how you even ventured into parenthood and your work as well. And I just want to say thank you. I really thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. Right. It's a pleasure. Let me know if I want me to jump on any other time. But
I'm just waiting to get on your podcast. Let's make that happen. Saturdays are good. Just send me whatever days you have, and how we just did this, quickly.
We'll make it happen.
Slowly but quickly.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
All right, then. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and say me hi to your wife and kids.
Likewise. Say hi to your husband. Please tell him Happy Father's Day as well.
I will. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, everyone. That was the Sibyl podcast. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the diverse stories that connect us all. If you'd love to feature on this podcast, just reach out to me at talktomo@mosibyl.com. And on behalf of everyone on the podcast, thank you all and have a great day. Love you. I remain your host, Mo. Bye.